Okay, so we'll go on to Chair Hansen. Go ahead.
Thank you. First motion for the board from Standards and Assessment Committee is item 13.3. The committee recommends that the board approve R277404, the Standard Test Administration and Testing Ethics Policy, Draft 1 on second and final reading.
So the motion before the board is that the committee recommends that the board approve R277404, the Standard Test Administration and Testing Ethics, Draft 1 on second and final reading. Seeing no discussion, please vote. Oh, Molly. I tried to wait a minute. Go ahead, Molly.
It doesn't affect the vote. I'm sorry. I just want to know.
Okay, let's finish our vote and then we'll come back.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Cool.
All right. Okay, I believe the voting is unanimous. Thank you. Board Member Hart?
Yeah, I'm interested. So is it coming back to us then with the 1, 2, and 3 in particular? I'm interested in the keyboarding item.
Darren, are you available? Oh, maybe Scott knows the answer. Scott, do you know?
So those items were committee requests to staff to come back to us to look at for future versions, but this is something that's amended and approved every year for the waiver.
Right.
Has to be out on time, so we just wanted that material, that information, so that we could look at it before we do this the next time around. So we'll come back in the same form it came this year, and that information will be available, to the committee, so we can certainly present that to the board.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Go ahead.
Next item, 13.4. The motion from committee for the board is that the committee recommends that the board approve R277701 Early College Program Draft 2 on second and final reading. There was a late draft that was posted by staff at Draft 3, which has to do with a discussion, I think, with LEAs about the way the funding would actually be processed, and some direct payments to the higher education institutions instead of to the LEAs. So that Draft 3 is in your backup. I frankly haven't had a big chance to review it. I believe that Jeff Van Holten is here and can help us with that. The reason for that.
Chair Hansen, do you want him to pull that up and show us what is either added or taken away?
I think that would be wise because that wasn't reviewed in committee, and I will, make the amended motion. I guess I'll need to make a motion to amend that we approve Draft 3.
Chair, would you like me to explain?
Please.
Oh, sorry, wrong chair.
We have lots of chairs, vice chairs, and all the above. You'll just see on line 91 and 92, we took out the phrase "an LEA has distributed" because staff has recently come to find out in working with USHE that it would be easier if we just transferred the funds directly to USHE rather than having the fund go to LEA and then the LEA send it to USHE. It just eliminates a step. So we took out that language to allow for that to be the process.
And I'll take a point of privilege and ask Jeff just a question. So the LEA has to make some determinations about how the funds are allocated. And there's a preference established for kids from low-income homes. So the LEA, I guess, would make all those determinations and then just direct USB where the funds should go instead of bringing the funds in and allocating them themselves. Is that right? The direction's still from the LEA.
Correct. The data would be given to us from the LEAs regarding which students qualify and how many, but rather than passing the funding and passing it back, we would just hold on to the money, get the data, and then transfer the money that is needed to USHE rather than bringing the LEAs into the process.
Okay, so the process, the decision process not affected, just the money stream.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready to make the motion to amend, I guess. We'll need to vote on that, I guess, Chair, and then move to the main motion. So the committee recommends a motion to amend the motion for the board so that it states the committee recommends that the board approves R277701 Early College Program Draft 3 on second and final reading.
So the amendment is to accept Draft 2, right? Or is it Draft 3?
Draft 3.
A draft 3. Okay, so the amendment is that to change that from draft 2 to draft 3. Any discussion to that amendment? Board Member Earl?
I'm understanding the ease. I guess I'm just thinking in my mind a little bit here. So it's just a transfer, right? Instead of going to the LEA and then going on. But my question centers around something a little bit different. It has to do a little bit with ownership, where it's going directly to the higher ed. I'm just trying to figure out, and it's funding for K-12 schools. Is that accurate? But we're going to be funding higher ed. So I'm trying to figure out if I don't know the consequences of this, is what I'm speaking out loud here. If there's an unintended consequence to this about dipping into, and I understand we're using it's one more, right? One less, I don't know. Okay.
One less transfer of funds.
Yeah.
Nothing different than what's been happening, just with one less transfer.
Except it's coming from the LEA itself. So there's an ownership there and it's staying within public ed, where the other way around, it's going to higher ed. And maybe there's no difference there. I guess I'm just thinking out loud a little bit, making sure this is kind of a sound movement.
Mm-hmm.
The LEA, if I understand this correctly, the LEA is still sending up names or who should receive this funding, and without the LEA saying they receive the funding, the higher ed will not receive it. Is that accurate, Jeff?
Yes, and Nathan Ock is here as well to provide any extra context, but essentially this is to cover the fees that are associated with concurrent enrollment courses. So they would have been paid regardless, so that you have to pay the USHE institutions either way. So this has already been happening, but we just found a more efficient way to do it, and we wanted to make sure the rule reflected that language so that we could do it the more efficient way. But it's already been happening.
Okay. So I need the motion back. So the amendment is to amend and say draft 3. Seeing no other hands, all in, please vote to just change it to draft 3. I'll come back to you, Kristen. Board Member Lear, thank you. Okay, that's unanimous. So, Board Member Norton. Oh, you're okay? Board Member Norton, did you have a question? Oh, you were just voting. Okay, thank you. All right, so now the motion before the board is somewhere.
The motion before the board.
The motion is that the board approves R277701 Early College Program Draft 3 on second and final reading. See no discussion. Please vote. I see that's unanimous. Is everyone the same? Okay. Go ahead, Chair Hansen.
And moving to item 13.5, the motion for the board is that the committee recommends that the board approve R277476 Local Innovation Civics Education Pilot Program, Draft 3, as amended by the committee on second and final reading. And I believe that Jenny has an amendment for this, so encourage you to take her amendment before we move forward.
Okay, so that is the motion before the board. And then Jenny, I'll go ahead and go to you. You have an amendment?
Yeah, the amendment is that the board shall approve. Okay, so to add after line 108, the following. The board shall approve any contract for a third-party provider pursuant to section 53F 5219.5, and an approved contractor shall provide an annual report to the board.
Okay, so that is the motion. I think we have to have a second on that.
Second.
Second, thank you, Board Member Klein. Jenny, do you want to speak to your
Yeah.
motion?
I'll speak to it. In the law, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. It just says that the state board may contract with a third-party provider. Sometimes these contracts are less than the threshold of being brought before us. And I just think in this case, I think it's important that we know who these civics providers are for our, these third-party providers, know who they are, what they're doing, and I would love a report back on what they've been engaged in, just to the either Standards and Assessment Committee or, just in general, a report back to the board. So that's the reasoning behind that.
Thank you, Board Member Earl. Board Member Straight?
Yeah, it's just a question. Does this stay in alignment with what the legislature passed?
It's right there.
So it's exactly the same wording? Or is this in alignment with what the legislation
It's,
intended?
can I answer that? Is that all right?
What is a concern?
Say that again, Board Member Straight. Will you ask your question again?
Oh, I'm sorry. So what is the concern and how does this stay in alignment with what the law that was passed?
It stays
Okay.
in a, can I answer? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
go ahead. Yes,
It
Jenny.
stays in exact alignment. You can see that it references the code. The only difference is that it would ask that vendor or that contractor be brought before the board to be approved. So that's the only, if we choose to use a third-party provider, it leaves it open for that. But if we do, the contract would come before the board for approval.
Thank you. Board Member Straight, did that answer your question?
So you made a comment in a committee meeting that you were concerned about service learning. Is this tied to that?
I'm not sure. Well, it would be reflective of whatever contract. So the contract, if I'm understanding, has to apply to the law. Is that accurate? I don't think we had something outside of that.
Well, you said you were going to pay close attention and you were concerned about service learning and how that would be used within a civics course.
Sure. I think if we review a contract, that would be something to be aware of.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair Hansen, do you have another comment or?
Just questions, I guess. So the rule already has reporting requirements for the LEAs who make the proposal, they're granted some funds, and then they have to come back and report on how those work, the progress report. So I understand that you'd be making an additional reporting requirement that would have to be in a contract that for any third-party service provider. And then I also see that the LEAs can use a board-approved online provider to collect performance and information, and the LEAs can contract with other service providers as part of their proposals. So are we attempting to impose this on the LEAs as well, or this is just if the board contracts directly with a service provider?
Jenny, do you have a response to that?
The intent is for our contract, and that's why it's referencing specifically this part of the code. So the person that we're contracting with, or the organizations or third party, I'm just asking that those contracts be brought before the board for our vetting before they're approved. Sometimes if it's not more than $100,000, we don't see those contracts. And that's what I'm asking in this case, is that we review and vet those contracts, and it's the third party provider, if we choose to use that. That isn't adding an extra element for the LEAs, that this is adding a thorough vetting and transparency for the state board.
So if I understand correctly, then we're saying that 100,000 threshold doesn't serve us in this instance, and we're putting an exception in so that all contracts would have to come before the board if they have to do with civics.
If we as a board contract with a third party provider, yes, for this area. I'm not suggesting everything that every LEA is doing. That's not the case here. It's specifically spelled out in this section of the law that it's if the state board contracts with a third party provider for this information, then that contract would come before the board to be approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. Chair Huntsman? You're on mute.
Can you go back to the amendment here? It seems like there's a second part that not only there's that $100,000 threshold, but and it's only limited to our board's contract, not the LEA. But then there's also, wasn't there a reporting, an annual report to the board? Would this report, my concern with this is what's in the report? Is it a financial spent report? Is it participation? Is it content? I'm not sure what that shall provide an annual report to the board, what that report would look like as this is being amended. I'm a little confused.
So Chair Huntsman, do you want me to reach to Board Member Earl?
That would be
Thank you.
great. Or staff, when we say annual report, the definition of an annual report is maybe staff can speak to it. It's about managing expectations.
Right, Patty?
Concerning, oh, okay, I was going to say, I envisioned it concerning their contract, how they carried out their contract. So if we need to add additional detail to that, so it's spelled out specifically for you, that would be completely appropriate. I'd be happy to either amend that if you feel like it needs additional detail there.
I still don't know what would be in the report. They're going to provide a service from their scope of work of a contract. That there's three parts of a contract. There's time, there's scope of work, and then the dollars. So would that be? I'm still confused. What?
Well, I'm talking myself, but I would want to know how they used, and I guess you're using the term scope of work. I would assume the contract, but the scope of work to carry on this specific request that we have for this specific program.
Okay.
Dr. Norman, do you have something specific on annual reports? I'll let you have a minute and I'll go to Board Member Norton.
I wouldn't specific on the annual reporting of it. Just on the process of where this would be in the purchasing process. I think that's more the question I have. So maybe the purchasing team can get on to be able to say, what does this mean? Does this mean that the staff would go through the entire process and then bring to the board for a final approval? Is it a two-step approval process, or is it within the scope of work itself? That's the part that I would be confused on or need more information.
Thank you. Board Member Norton?
Yes, my question probably should be directed to Robert Austin. I love civics, I love social studies, I love history. I think those are all so important. My question is, how does he see that this is going to fit in with the new social studies curriculum? Is it in lieu of? I realize this is a pilot program. I don't see how it can just be added to, because the social studies curriculum is already very robust. I don't think that we're adding any more time to our day. So I'm just wondering, how is this going to be implemented? And I know we've got other things coming down the pipeline as well. I don't think that we can just expect teachers can just add more to their curriculum.
So Board Member Norton, if we can hold on that for a minute, because we're on this amendment.
Okay.
And then if it's about whether you're going to vote up or down on this, that would make a difference. If that's okay, then we'll come back to your question. Thank you. Board Member Straight. You're on mute.
By way of disclosure, I've worked on this for 9 months now, and very closely associated with this legislation, followed it all the way through, attended multiple meetings in regards to this. This is simply a pilot program looking for innovation, driven by application, by people who want to be involved in it. And I just don't want to add complications to it, because I don't even think we're going to, each individual project or innovation or idea is not going to be receiving millions and millions of dollars. And I just think it's onerous to add too much. Yes, we're going to get reports back. I think we'll have a better idea then. But I just want to see what innovation does and what teachers can come up with.
Thank you, Board Member Straight. Board Member Moss?
Thank you. Just clarifying, as I understand, this would apply to somebody we engage to conduct those enumerated tasks, reviewing, and I'm sorry, I've lost it in the code, but look for innovation, explore barriers, that type of thing. Is that correct? We would just be requiring that anybody that the state contracts with to pursue some of the objectives of this pilot would report back to us yearly on what they're doing, what they're finding. That seems helpful and not much of a barrier. I'm just making sure I'm understanding it correctly.
That is the intent. If I can respond to that, that is the intent, that so that we know who's engaged in this. And yeah, that's exactly right.
Just for our contractors, then this wouldn't be imposing it on LEAs.
No.
Sorry, I jumped the gun on a follow-up, Chair. Sorry.
She did answer that.
Sorry. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, Board Member.
I'm just curious. Who are we concerned about? And maybe this is a question for Jenny. Who are we concerned about that would be a contractor that we would have to be reviewing these very low-level contracts? I feel like we're playing some kind of hide the ball game. Who is it you're concerned about?
Specifically, we have a contractor currently, a policy catalyst that is.
Jenny, turn your picture off. Oh, did we lose her completely?
No, I don't know. My Zoom, am I back on?
Yes, you're back on. So
my Zoom is in and out, so I don't know why today. So I just want to know who's doing this. I think there's a transparency element to it. And we have a couple of contractors that we work with currently that I think we want to know about. We want to know what work they're doing.
If I can follow up for a minute, Chair Bellner.
Go ahead.
I'm just wanting to know who. This is a very low-level contract. I think Brent's point's well taken, Member Straight's point's well taken. And I can just see us bickering over the maybe some political feelings, and and if there's somebody who's concerning, I'd like to know. But if it's just a fear of somebody that concerns you, I'd like to know that too.
Jenny, I don't believe she heard the one contractor you said out loud.
Yeah, Policy Catalyst is who we're contracting with, but that's not been brought before the board because they are under the amount level,
right?
The funding's level. I just think we need to be transparent on this particular item
because that's a question, Laura. Because why on this?
Why would we not, especially in the area of civics education? I think we would want to know who we're contracting with. And I also think there's some great entities out there that we can reach out to and contract with. We've got a number of state organizations that engage in this capacity already. So I think Jeff's got his hand up, I think.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer.
Okay, Jeff, okay, go. Oh, you can't raise your hand, Jeff. That's right.
No, as a co-host, okay. I'm not allowed. I just wanted to clarify the effect of this amendment, because I've heard a few things and I think there's a little bit of confusion. The bill itself already requires that a contract would have to be you would have to go under contract as a board. So the assumption would be it would go through your regular contracting process. So as Board Member Earl pointed out, what this would do that's different from the process normally is it would require any contract 100,000 above or below, where typically you're only seeing a contract for approval if it's 100,000 or above. So that would be what's different. It would require any contract of any size. And the one thing that is different here, aside from that one piece, would be the reporting requirement, which may or may not be generally part of a contract anyway, some type of report back. But this just would formalize that there would for sure be at least an annual report back to the board in some format by the contractor. So that's just, I just wanted to make sure it was clear on what the effect of this amendment would be in comparison to the regular process. So hopefully that helps.
Any more? I don't see any other questions. Robert, do you have something that you would like to contribute?
Thank you, Chair. This is Robert Austin, State Board of Education Humanities team. The challenge here with this bill is that it's an innovations bill encouraging LEAs to engage in innovative approaches to civics education. And so my concern is with the timeline and of getting programs in place, any impediments that might slow down that process will just slow down the process. So that's my only concern with yet another expectation for the reporting under this motion. But, you know, happy to talk about this. I'm not aware of any third-party agreements that LEAs will be engaging in, but we won't know until we see the applications. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, so don't leave, Robert, because I'm sure there's others. Board Member Earl?
This is not an engagement with LEAs. This would be third-party providers with the state. So maybe there was some confusion there. So this would be, and are we not intending to provide a third-party provider? And if we are, this creates that transparency and that knowledge of who that third-party provider is and the accessibility for people to use that person or organizations.
So Robert, do you have a response? Are we going to be approving third-party providers?
I don't see us using the third-party providers for the
or approving?
Only if I guess the only approval piece is if an LEA wants to work with a third-party provider to provide part of whatever it was in their innovation, then of course that would be a part of the grant approval process.
Dr. Thronson?
Yeah, I just want to clarify within this space, there is a part in the bill that we're referring to that allows USBE to partner and for like professional learning. That's what the intention of that part was, to advance those that maybe aren't in the grant, but to advance civic education across the system. And so if we were to do that, I guess within the process and why the board probably doesn't review things under that amount is they have to meet the eligibility requirements that we put out. And they also have to like sign our agreements and things. So if we were to preclude a vendor for our own, like we don't like a particular group, I think we're going to have issues from a legality of that. And maybe that's a purchasing question if purchasing's available to talk about when can we preclude a vendor and what are the reasons for that. I think that would be hard if the committee that picks this says these are the people, and then the board says no, like what's the legality in there?
Thank you, Jennifer. Board Member Earl?
But we do say no sometimes, right? I mean, we did a couple months ago. I think the point here is that we need to know who we're engaging with, and that's the ask here. And maybe we're not going to use anyone. Maybe Robert Austin isn't going to put out for someone to assist with the civics engagement pilot, and districts are going to choose to use the money for their own vendors. But if the state is engaging in this, I do think this is an important area where we have some transparency and some understanding of who that partner is, or who the recommendations are coming forward from.
Thank you, Jenny. Board Member Hymas?
Yeah, I just want to speak in favor of this, just simply along with Jenny's thoughts here. I like to know, and I get asked questions, right? And people come to me and say, hey, why is this here? You know, if nothing else, for me to see it. I don't imagine we would turn down a whole lot, if any, but it would be good. And I get that in the face of all this reading that we've done. It's just a little more, but it would sure be helpful to me when I face constituents and say, this is what I support, and I'd like to know. I'd like to be in the loop.
Thank you, Board Member Hymas. Jenny, I do have a question. It's on the board shall approve any contract. Should it be a contract?
Well, I don't know. I think that would speak to whether, you know, we're going to use a considerable amount of funding for a third-party provider, or if we're.
But I'm using the word any or it's the board shall approve any contract. Okay, it's the verbiage here I'm concerned about. That is it saying we should approve any contract?
So you're suggesting it should be a contract for third-party.
Or all contracts from.
I will take any help. I just think saying any contract is a problem. Jenny, that's just a.
Yep, I understand
clarity.
that.
It's not changing. I don't think it's changing your intent.
It can be changed to I can see that.
I don't know if is right, but I just want to, if anyone, staff, if you have some help here, Angie, I don't know what's appropriate before we read this out.
I believe Angie has had to step away for a different meeting, but writing in the singular is always preferred. So, and that is my mistake, because I had retweeted this for Board Member Earl, but.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure we're not just saying we're going to take any contract. The board shall.
Could it just say all contracts from third-party providers?
Board Member Klein, I appreciate that, but still the board shall approve all contracts. That's a problem for me.
I think
Carol,
this covers it.
Carol, do you have a little help here?
No, I had a different question.
Okay.
Ponder that a grammatical one while I ask my question. Usually, Jenny's the one that identifies this problem. I'm wondering if this goes beyond the law. And we should not be making it more onerous for a contractor, or if the law is silent enough that it doesn't go beyond the law.
Beyond the law to ask to review contracts by the board?
The law the law that initiated this program to approve contracts.
Let me read it. It says offer professional learning, mentoring. Is that what you're referring to? That
state board approves the third-party contract in accordance with rules the state board makes under subsection 3 was what I was looking at. And that's the approval process for this. Is that not right, Jeff? 184, line 184?
It begins on line 186.
What about 184? What isn't that? Is that a different contract?
That is a different subsection for a participating LEA.
And 184 is a different, and the state board approves third in accordance with rules the state board makes. Okay, so that belongs above. So the state board may contract with a third party provider to offer. I can see that we could do that either way. It doesn't bother me. I just hadn't read the law and wondered if that would be a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Klein, do you have a question on this amendment? Board Member Lear, you okay? Board Member Earl, do you have a question on the amendment?
I just think it's one more thing that's real important, that this entity, if we choose to engage in it, and whoever we as its staff, if we don't have knowledge of it, that there's two other things that they engage in. And part of that is they're going to actually be making recommendations for initiatives, policymaking, and legislation to improve civics education. I just think we need to know if someone's engaged in this, who they are, what's going on, and their work in this area. So it's not just professional learning. So I do think it's important that if we okay someone, that we need to know what they're engaged in and who they are. Not just, you know, letting someone get approval and then we don't ever hear from them again.
Thank you, Board Member Earl. Board Member Straight, do you have a comment to this amendment?
Yes, I was just wondering what would constitute an organization group, someone who provides professional learning, from being allowed to do that professional learning for an LEA. You mentioned a name earlier.
I don't think we have that right or ability to say that.
I know, but that's the intent of what's being said with this amendment, is that you can limit. If you don't like their politics, or you don't like something about them, then we can eliminate them from consideration for a contract. I think that's outside. If they're a qualified vendor, then they should be qualified to do the professional learning. And I might not agree with their politics. So I'm just not certain where this is going.
Board Member Moss?
I'll be quick. I didn't have the language in front of me, but you know, if there's somebody engaged to make recommendations for initiatives, public policy, or legislation, that if we engage, it looks like it's optional. State more may contract. I can't imagine we do a lot of those, but if we do engage, that seems like a pretty broad scope. So I don't know. It might be hypothetical, you know, what groups may or may not do it or where they're coming from, but I don't see any downside to you know, reviewing who that's going to be if they're in that process of recommending policy or legislation. That's pretty high level thinking, and it just seems to me sound to know who they are and get a report on what they're doing, so we can consider what those recommendations might be. There may be a lot of unknowns here, but it just seems like a fairly sound idea to have some visibility.
So, Board Member Moss, I just want some clarity. You said that they were going to give us policy or legislation.
It says that, and at least correct me if I'm wrong here, I think we're talking about subsection 5 in the statute, that we may contract with somebody, 3 things. C, make recommendations for initiatives, public policy, well, there it is, it's highlighted, or legislation to improve civics. So they're not writing bills, they are making recommendations for legislation, right? We're not appointing them to the legislature or to the board.
Thank you. I got it.
That's pretty high level thought is my point.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. Chair Huntsman?
Oh, that's one concern, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this, is moving forward, say the amendment passed and we put this in place. How do we, on the reporting, or how do we go about the award in vetting whatever something bad outside that they want to come in? Are we going to come up with our own ESG kind of scoring metrics to weigh all contracts and vendors? And I'm curious of our next steps where we're not, I mean, this sounds really harmless getting into this space, but how do we stay in it and be consistent? And then my other concern is what vendors are going to want to go through the whole proposal process, not knowing how they were going to be measured as acceptable. And I just use ESG as a, you know, it was brought up earlier today, that scoring that's constantly evolving. I'm just putting myself in the vendor's shoes of, do I or do I not, on and it doesn't seem like very significant, super significant and moving forward, but I'm just kind of a little bit concerned on the next steps, that it's not going to be as easy as what we think as we start going down this road. Roger.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis?
I move to call the question.
Okay, it's non-debatable. It's to call this question to vote. Please vote if you want to call this question. Oh, well, please vote. Okay, I see it.
Vice Chair Belknap.
Yes.
This is Board Member Booth. I had to move to my phone in order to make it up to Salt Lake for the event that's coming up soon. And so I don't have any way of voting on this phone. It doesn't appear. So I'll just be here and I'll say yes or yay or nay or something.
Okay, so tell me yes or no if you want to call the question.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so it's unanimous. Okay, so the amendment before the board is that the board shall approve a contract for a third-party provider pursuant to section 53F-5-219 subsection 5, and an approved contractor shall provide an annual report to the board. Please vote.
Yes, Board Member Booth.
Thank you, Booth. Board Member Booth. Okay, I'm going to have a roll call vote. Here we go. Board Member Booth was a yes. Board Member Cannon.
No.
Board Member Klein.
Yes.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Board Member Earl.
Yes.
Board Member Hanson.
No.
Board Member Hart.
Yes.
Chair Huntsman.
Yes.
Board Member Hutchings.
Yes.
Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Lear.
No.
Board Member Moss.
Yes.
Board Member Norton. Board Member Norton.
No.
No. Board Member Straight.
No.
1, 2, 3. That amendment passes. So the motion before the board now is that the board approves our 277476 local innovation civics education pilot program is still probably draft 3 as amended on second and final reading. Is it still going to be draft 3, Angie, or draft 4?
It'd be draft 3 as amended, I believe.
Oh, thank you, Chair Hanson. Okay, so that the board approve our 277476 local innovation civics education pilot program draft 3 as amended on second and final reading. Please vote.
Yes, Booth.
Thank you. I believe that's unanimous. Is that accurate? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Chair Hanson.
Thank you. Next item, 13.6, the motion for the board from committee was that the committee recommends that the board approve R277465 CPR in schools draft 2 on second and final reading. There has been a draft 3 posted by staff just today. There's a change that allows for no hands-on work by students if the CPR training is given virtually. That was just brought to my attention a few minutes ago, but that's the draft. The draft 3 has been posted for review. I have some questions about that. I guess we can make the motion and then move forward. But can I ask staff first, how time sensitive is this on this draft 3?
The rule itself needs to be passed because of the funding being available July 1, and it still would need to go out for a 30-day public comment period for the month of June. So passage today is fairly important timeline-wise for the grant.
Okay, thank you. I will then make the amendment, and then I have some questions. And I'm not sure that I'll vote for the amendment, but I'll make that so we can get it on the table.
So, but did you read the original motion from committee, Chair? Did I miss that?
I did. Draft
Okay,
2.
yes, you did. Yes, you did. Okay, sorry.
Reading. And the motion then would be to amend draft 2 to draft 3. And just have a question for staff about that.
Go ahead, Chair. You're right there.
Thanks. Yeah, we weren't able to discuss this in our committee meeting, and I understand that perhaps we didn't see all the nuances of this at the time, but I have some real reservations about CPR training being done virtually. I'm not sure if any of you have been through that training, but I mean, you're on the dummy, you're clearing the throat, you're putting the mouthpiece in and all that stuff. And doing that on a video link, just to me, I have some real reservations about whether that's a good idea or not. So I will at this point probably vote against this draft 3 unless staff has some information that will convince me that that's a good way to deliver this training.
Go ahead. I just don't know if it's part of the law or what.
I'll take a quick stab here, and this is just one of those technical issues. In Senate Bill 192, it was pointed out to us yesterday by a superintendent during our USSA meeting that there is an exemption in the bill for students would not be required to do the certified training if they're in an online only setting. It had not been included in the rule because it was already in the bill. However, it was pointed out correctly, and this was my mistake, that right here on line 54, you can see, except for a participant who's enrolled in an online only school, the requirement for the training would exist. However, it does make that part of this subsection that says what your rules shall say. So we are actually required by this bill to state, it's one of those weird things where we don't restate code in rule unless the code tells you to restate code in rule, if that makes sense. So here it's saying we have to put in our rule that there is an exemption for online only school participants from taking the CPR training.
Chair, I'm going to go to Jody Parker, if that's okay. Scott?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Jody Parker, I'm the Health Education Specialist at the Utah State Board of Education. I would like to point out that the requirement is for training, not certification. Sorry, Jeff, I'm going to correct you on that word. There is a very distinct difference between training and certification. Online programs do not typically certify in CPR, and most employers would not accept an online certification as being like OSHA qualified, which is kind of an industry standard. So that's a really big distinction. Also, I am seeing that it's the psychomotor skills that are exempt and not the training requirement, because the training itself is one of our standards. And R277, there we go. Make sure I have all the sevens in line. Does require LEAs to that we have training, that there's a curriculum adopted for all of our standards. And CPR's training is one of our high school standards. So every student, as part of the health education graduation requirement, has to have some kind of training in CPR. So an online version could be one of like American Heart Association or Red Cross's videos that they have that are pretty high quality, but you're right, Chair Hansen, they're not going to have the psychomotor part where they're working on the mannequin, which is fundamental, in which case we're not going to reimburse the school at $6 per student for being trained in high quality hands-on CPR.
Chair Hansen, did that help?
I appreciate the info. Sounds like this is one of those situations where we're bound to the law, even if the law might not be exactly as we'd like it. So I'll withdraw my, I guess, decision to vote against this and to hold it back because we don't have the time, and let's get on with things.
So your motion now is that your amendment, or your motion now is that, I got to find it, is that the board approve our 277465 CPR in schools draft 3 on second and final reading. Is that what you're asking?
That's the amendment, yes.
That's the amendment. I'll need a second to that.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Straight. Board Member Lear?
Will you just remove the ampersand and put a regular and in there?
Okay, they're nodding yes.
Please, that just.
But I really like it because I can say ampersand. I can do that one.
I'm just cranky and it bugs the hell out of me. Sorry.
There you go. Okay, Board Member Hart?
Are we speaking to the motion at this point?
Yes,
This is
we
the
are.
amendment.
Or the amendment?
The amendment.
We haven't voted on the amendment yet.
Can someone tell me if there is anything that goes beyond exactly what is in the law?
Jeff's looking. I can see him.
I see. I do too.
Jeff, would you like me to answer that? Chair, would you like me to answer that?
Go ahead, Jody. Yes.
Jeff was looking. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to step on his toes. The way that the rule and the new law from Senate Bill 192 are written, there's nothing beyond what's required. And Board Member Hart, if I can add, there's also nothing in here that we're not already doing, and that we've been doing since like 2014 when we first started receiving funds. Governor Herbert gave us $200,000 annually to do a CPR program in high schools. And the criteria that we were using to get money to those schools to do this is exactly what Senator Stevenson wrote into this code, or his bill, which is now code. And then we use the same criteria to write the rule. So there's nothing that is beyond the law, and there's also nothing beyond what we've already been doing for like a decade.
Thank you so much. That is extremely helpful.
Thank you. Okay, so the amendment is to change this from draft 2 to draft 3. We need to vote on that first to change it to draft 3. Please vote. Dr. Thronson, your mic is on. I think that's unanimous. Okay, so the motion now before the board is that the board approves our 277465 CPR in schools draft 3. I don't think it's amended now, on second and final reading. Seeing no more discussion, please vote.
Yes, Booth.
Thank you, Board Member Booth. Board Member Davis, oh, there it is, okay. Board Member Hymas. Thank you. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you so much. Chair Hansen.
One more, item 13.7. The motion for the board is that the committee recommends the board approve the amended standards revision timeline for final approval.
Okay, so the motion before the board is that the board approve the amended standards revision timeline for final approval. No discussion, please vote.
Yes, Booth.
Chair Huntsman? Maybe lost his. There it is. That's unanimous. Chair Hansen, you're done?
That concludes the standards and assessment report for May 5th, 2022. Thank you.
Okay.